Hello, everyone. You are listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast. I am Jordan Hall, and I am pumped to be joined by Jim Jackson, the play-by-play voice of the Flyers. Jim, the Flyers have 5 games in the books. They are off to a 1-3-1 start. John Tortorella and the team, Jim, safe to say they are not overreacting to this start. But I wanted to get your take on it. Where do you feel the team is through this 1-3-1 start? How are you keeping it in perspective? And I would love to ask you just how difficult it is to travel home from Seattle and play the next day. You travel with the team, of course, for a long time. You are used to traveling and going through it. What do you think it's like for the players to come home and play the home opener and get shut out 3-0 like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough home opener. It was tough once we saw the schedule when it came out. I do think sometimes we can talk ourselves into being tired too. So I'm a little old school that way, Jordan. Some coaches that I worked with in the minor leagues, one of them being Tommy McVie, old time legendary coach, he would never even mention fatigue or being tired or anything. He said, you mention it, it becomes reality. You start feeling tired. I don't know how much reality there is in that, but he just wouldn't in any way recognize that as a factor when sometimes clearly it is. And I think it was for the Flyers. They did everything they could. They traveled the day after the Seattle game. They gave the team the next morning, which was the morning of the game, off. I mean, you could argue maybe it would have been better to get them into the flow and have them skate that morning so there was more like a normal home game on a regular schedule. But I think they basically, especially with the sports science telling you, give them more rest, give them a night, a full rest to sleep in and all that. So they went that route and, they came out flat. So it is what it is. They could have still won that game if they had been able to finish. They hit 3 posts and had numerous other chances that they missed the net on, and Lincoln had made a couple of good saves. The game itself probably wasn't as bad as the Seattle game where they completely imploded in the second period. But, going into those games, everything was fine. They had won the opener, lost a tough back-to-back in Calgary, and then a frustrating loss in Edmonton, but a game where they played well for long stretches. So really they're going into that Seattle game, Jordan, and feeling as though, hey, we win this game. It's a 2-1-1 road trip. That's good. Then we come home for our home opener. But here we are 2 games later, and they went 0-2. And so instead of talking about a 3-1-1 start or even a 2-1-2 start or something like that, it's 1-3-1, and that doesn't have a real good ring to it. But it is just 5 games, very early. We can look and see some trends, of course, some reasons for concern, some reasons for optimism, but it's only 5 games. It seemed like more because it was stretched out over a pretty long time and because they were on the road to start, but it's 5 games of an 82-game schedule. There's a long way to go.
We've been talking a little bit about Owen Tippett, and maybe they're in a different spot if he's finishing a little bit more. And we've seen Owen Tippett go through these kinds of stretches where, man, he's looking great, but then he's just barely missing the finish to his game. Do you feel like when Tippett starts to show that he can finish, the Flyers are going to be in much better shape?
Well, they are, because he's on the ice a lot. He's in offensive situations. He's on the power play. He's getting chances, Jordan. When a player is getting chances, I generally don't get too worried. I think he has the ability to finish. He has a great shot. I don't think it's as though he can't finish. So I'm not really worried about him as much as I would be worried about players who are not getting scoring chances. And they have some guys, on their top 2-3 lines that aren't even getting a lot of chances. That is more concerning to me. So for Tip, I think he just has to keep doing what he's doing. I think he really wants that first one. I think he showed it on that 2-on-1. A lot of people saying he should have given it to Michkov, but put yourself in Owen Tippett's shoes. He still doesn't have a goal. He's got a point-blank shot, and if it doesn't glance off Lincoln and shoulder, it may very well have gone top corner, and we're not talking about the same kind of situation at all. As it looks in retrospect, he had a lane to give it to Michkov too. So second guessing to me. I want Owen Tippett for the most part shooting the puck when he has scoring chances. So I'm not going to yell at him if he doesn't, pass up a pass and take the shot. I think in general, the Flyers are better off if he's shooting the puck. He's missing the net too some. I think the Flyers as a team are a little guilty of maybe being a little too fine with their shooting. Just get pucks on net, go to the net, go for rebounds, tips. Torch talks about this all the time. Flyers have to get better at those greasy goals. They've got to get more of them. You can score off the rush, and the Flyers will probably be a very good team that way. Again, they certainly were last year, but you still ultimately, eventually, the games are going to get tighter. You're going to have to be able to score those games off the cycle, offset offensive plays on the power play with people in front, people deflecting pucks, people screening goaltenders. They got to get some of those kind of goals, and that's the only way they're going to get scoring consistently.
Celebrity cook Steve Martirano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martirano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations for Martirano's Prime on Open Table. Jim, it's funny you mentioned the 2-on-1 with Mishkov and Tippett. I was thinking the same thing. Man, Mishkov's right there on his wing there. But at the same time, you are looking for guys to shoot. You're looking for a shoot-first mentality. So I had no problem that he shot the puck there, maybe looked to get Mishkov a rebound. But no doubt, I think the Flyers know if Tippett starts going, they'll start going. Is there another or a different area, Jim, where you're concerned? For me, one is goaltending. I just think it's there. You can't avoid it. They need more consistency from the backup position. And Samuel Ersson, I think, has looked fine, but he's still very much going through it for the first time as a number one. Where is an area of concern maybe for you?
I don't have any concern with Sam at all. I think he's played 3 games. The 3 he started, obviously, he was in relief in the other, but the 3 games he's started, he's given the Flyers a chance to win all 3. They won one, got a point out of the other, and didn't score any goals in the other one. So I'm a believer in Sam. I like his approach. I think he's a kind of guy that, every goal he's going to allow a soft goal once in a while. He's got that ability to flush it. You know that, Jordan, flush it. And as a result, I think that makes him a guy who's set to be a number one goaltender. They have to get better goaltending from the 1A or the B option. Ivan Fedotov has struggled. There's no question about it. You can't cover that up. The 2 games he's played, the save percentage is high. Team hasn't played great in front of him in those games, I will say that, but they need saves. Some of them were stoppable pucks. He's got a lot going on. He's adjusting to a new league, a new country, a lot going on. Hard to jump on him for just 2 starts this year and really, 5 games played all told, 4 starts, whatever it is. Not a lot of sample size there. He had his moments in the preseason where he looked pretty good. So I think they got to give him a little bit more of a leash. But from what John Tortorella said, in one of his press conferences, I'm not sure that leash is very long. So, this is a results-oriented business. Production league, and if you're a goaltender and you get 3-4 chances and you don't give your team a chance to win, then changes will be made. They do have another prospect, obviously, in Kolosov down with the Phantoms. Now, he's been okay. He's had some good stretches and some rough stretches in his games with the Phantoms so far. It's not as though he's busting the door down. So I think they can afford to be a little bit more patient. I know the fans aren't going to like that, but you have to at least give this guy a little bit of a chance. He hasn't looked good. He's not only allowing goals, but he looks a little uncomfortable. So I'm not sure, even when he is stopping the puck, and hopefully he gets to the stage where that is happening consistently, that he's going to look graceful. He's a big, huge guy, and he's more of a blocker, a guy the puck's going to hit when he's playing well. So I'm not sure he's stylistically going to be an elegant goaltender at any point, but he can still be, I think, an effective goaltender, and that's what they're hoping they get. But really, if you look at the 5-game start, those 2 games, the Flyers scored some goals, didn't win, could have won those games with good goaltending. So, in that case, this start that we're talking about, 1-3-1, is at least 2-2-1. Maybe it's 3-1-1. So that's probably been, in my mind, the biggest factor through these 5 games. Yes, they haven't scored a ton. They haven't scored enough and have been outscored at even strength. But a lot of that being outscored has been some, questionable goals. And they do need to finish better and all that, all these other factors. But really, when it gets down to it, 2 of the games, they just didn't get great goaltending. And I don't really think had a chance to win the game because of that. So that has a lot to do with why we're talking about the 1-3-1 start. And the question is, how long do you give him? I think he's got to get at least 1 more, 2 more starts. And even if you see just short signs of improvement, it's not as though he's going to have to toss a shutout in his next outing. But if he gets a little bit better and you see signs that he's getting a hold of everything, then you can probably stretch that out and give him a little bit more leeway. And then hopefully he gets to the point where he gets on a roll.
Yeah, you see the glimpses. He's made some difficult saves where it looks like he might settle in and give them a real good chance. And then he's given up a couple ones that I think he would want back. So we'll see how the Flyers approach it moving forward, how many more starts he gets to maybe settle in and give them a better chance to win. Jim, I thought it was very interesting today talking to John Tortorella at practice on Monday. He mentioned that he thought Sean Couturier was pretty effective on the wing. And then he played some good minutes on the wing. He moved back to center about midway through the game when they were trying to juggle things and just find a spark. But we'll see where it goes with Sean Couturier and where he plays. But I thought that Sean Couturier also had a good point after the game. He mentioned that they need to get some lines going chemistry-wise, and then maybe they can play a little more possession-based game, control and dictate play a little bit more when the chemistry starts to click. He thinks they're a little 2-1 and done. Do you feel like they need to stick with some lines here maybe and just get some chemistry going? I feel like that can hurt.
Yeah, I mean, John had said he was going to use these first 10 games, I believe was the amount he used, to find what lines he thinks will work. And he's trying them all. I mean, we're seeing all kinds of combinations. There is the argument that, players can't get used to one another if they're constantly in a blender like that. But in Torts' defense, he's got to find the connection. I mean, we're still waiting to find a line that really has had a great game. I think the fourth line in Seattle was really good. And that was Paling, Lawton, Hathaway. They spent a lot of time in the offensive zone, obviously scored some goals, looked like a really good line. But then Torts moved lots up, probably thinking, okay, let's see. He looks like he's playing well. Maybe he can spark one of the other lines for the home opener. It didn't pan out, but it's going to be very interesting. I do think you do have to settle at some point and let these guys try to develop chemistry. Sometimes it's automatic. It just clicks and you have it. And it's there from the very first shift you play as a duo or as a trio. But sometimes chemistry takes a little while and you have to play with somebody, get to know their tendencies. I think a player like Michkov, you're going to have to play with a little bit. He's not a normal hockey player. He thinks the game at a level that many don't. So I think it might take a little while for a player to adjust to him. Not that he's bad, not in any stretch, just that he's so elite in terms of his IQ, in terms of how he sees the game, that you will need to adjust to that. And that might take more than a game or more than 2 games. So we have to see if you can settle on line combinations or at least duos. A lot of coaches go with the 2 guys they keep together and then they'll rotate the other winger. See that with a lot of teams. Scotty Bowman did that. So we could go that route as well, but at least some semblance of some stability there. I thought Konechny and Michkov played well together, but the problem there is neither of them, I don't think, really wants to be on the left side. So if that's the case, can they play together? Unless you play Michkov at center, no. So, or Konechny at center, then you're probably going to have them on separate lines if they both want to be right wings and both seem more comfortable on the right side. He's trying Tippett quite a bit with Michkov. Is that a good mixture when Tippett's kind of a self-generating offensive player? Michkov's a player who can really play off of players more with give and goes and kind of little screens and things like that. We have to see. And so Torts is trying all these things. And, he said he was going to do it for the first 10 games. So I assume we still have 5 more games of watching some different combinations and seeing how they're going to look. As for Couturier, I think it was you with me talking to him after practice on Monday. And I think he was kind of okay with the wing thing. He kind of said, hey, I can tell you it's easier. Doesn't have to go as far back. He doesn't have as much responsibility defensively. He did get some good scoring chances on the wing. So who knows? Maybe that experiment is one of these things that in the first 10 games of this year, Torts finds works, and maybe Sean Couturier becomes a winger. He wouldn't be the first guy to go into his past 30 years and switch to the wing. Center is a very demanding position, as much and more so really defensively than offensively. You have to swing back. You have to play the full sheet. Maybe as a winger, you're playing a little less than the full sheet, and your defensive responsibilities are out high, so you don't have to get as deep defensively in the zone all the time, whereas a center, you almost always do. So it's a little less strenuous. This is a guy with, back-to-back back surgeries, a core muscle issue last year, 31. maybe a little less stress that way on him makes him a better player. Maybe that's what we're going to find out with all this juggling that's going on. So these are the things that the coaching staff is looking for and trying to discover here in the first 10 games. Some of it may come a little bit at the cost of a loss or two here and there, maybe. But again, I go back to if they had gotten the goaltending in a couple of those games, we probably wouldn't be talking about a bad start. So it might not have as much to do with the line juggling or the failure to find chemistry as it does just not getting puck stops in key moments. It's a combination of both a little, I think, but maybe a little bit more heavily leaning toward the not getting the puck stops.
Yeah, perhaps that is another reason to not overreact to 1-3-1 is that they are trying things. It's, could be chemistry that's going to come along eventually, and it just hasn't clicked just yet. And Jim, that's a great point about Couturier on the wing. I first saw it in warmups, and I'm thinking, man, this looks like a demotion. This is the guy that's typically a top six center, and he's playing on the wing on the fourth line. But maybe this is a way to get him feeling a little less pressure, like you mentioned, a demanding position like center, and maybe it opens him up a little bit offensively because I think they could use his offense.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. The other thing is, Jordan, I mean, the thing you lose there is his ability in the faceoff dot, and he's their best. So they don't have anybody else who's – I think Morgan Frost is getting to the point now where he's almost a 50-50 guy in faceoffs. But most of the other guys are below that, and you're going to end up without the puck a lot, without having your number one center. You can also have him take the faceoffs and then flop over to the wing, which – sometimes has been done. Giroux did that at times. But it's still, you're playing center or wing. If you lose the draw, you got to take the center defensive responsibilities. So you're going to end up, playing some at center if you do take the draws. So yeah, we see where that goes. I mean, Jett Luchanko's situation will probably impact that. I mean, if Jett stays, then I think we're more likely to see Sean Couturier on the wing. If Jett goes, there goes one more center, and you still have Noah Cates, who you can play in the middle, Scott Lawton, Morgan Frost, Ryan Poehling. But would you play those four all at center with still Couturier in the wing? I don't know. If Jett stays past the 9 games, then maybe there's a chance we see Coots as a winger.
I did want to ask you about Luchanko. It's a perfect segue. I think so many people are curious of, is this a 9-game thing, or could this kid really stay the whole year? I feel like he's blended in, Jim, a little bit offensively, 3 shots through 4 games. I think he's fighting it a little bit there, but there are glimpses of where he looks really good on certain shifts and does a lot of those little details that coaches love. How have you viewed his game, and do you think he's got the chance to stick?
He has the chance. I think the coach is in his corner. I think that it's really an unusual situation, Jordan, because most times when you have a stud 18-year-old that's being held for the 9-game trial, if you want to call it that, it's a guy who's lighting it up offensively. And are you willing to sacrifice his lack of ability in terms of defensively and with a rounding of his game? Because most young players aren't well-rounded that way. Mm-hmm. Jett's the exact opposite. He hasn't produced. He doesn't have a point. As you say, just 3 shots. Hasn't been that noticeable offensively. He's made some good plays, but he hasn't been a guy where you're saying, wow, every other shift for something he does offensively. But defensively, he's so sound. He'll make a mistake here or there, but his speed allows him to overcome mistakes. He does have a high IQ. He's a great, great pick. I mean, even if he gets sent back, this was a heck of a pick by the Flyers. This guy's going to be an NHL player and a good one. I guess the question is, will he develop better here or in Guelph, as well as with the World Junior Canadian team, which I'll assume he'll make and be a big part of. If you're looking to develop his offensive game, I think it probably will be better served to have him go back to junior, because he's going to play as much as he's playing now, and he's playing a decent amount of time. Looks like he might be a scratch on Tuesday because he was the extra in practice. Don't know that for sure. He's already been scratched once. And when he plays, he's not playing top minutes. He's getting solid minutes, but not as the number one center on the team. Whereas in Guelph, that's going to be him, right? He's going to be number one power play. He's going to kill penalties. He's going to play probably upwards of 20 minutes a game, maybe more. And then he's going to get to play World Juniors with some top competition, where he's also going to have, we assume, a big role. I think his offensive game would develop more there than it would here as a third line center, sometimes scratch for load management purposes. So I guess it comes down to, is he one of the four best centers on this team right now? I think he is. But is he so good that you want to sacrifice the potential of missing out on the development time that he would get in his year 18 season in junior and with the World Juniors and all that? So tough question. I mean, if you're going straight merit, straight talent, I think he's an NHL player now. But I have hopes that this guy can be a really good NHL player. And I wonder if he's going to have a better chance at that staying here now and missing a little bit of development for just playing here, or whether going back and getting all those minutes, all that prime stuff, and developing his offensive game a little more. He has to work on his shot and work on things like that. Can he do that here? I guess. Can he work on those things here? Yes, but I think in games he'll be able to work on it more in junior. So it's a tough call. I love the kid. I love his game. It's a great draft pick. If he stays, I think the Flyers have a very good player. If he goes back, I think they have a chance for maybe a great player in a year or two. And I'm not saying he can't be great if he stays. It could happen, but I think that it's more likely that if he gets those offensive reps down in junior, I think that could help his offensive game even more. We'll see. I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong here. I think that if he stays, I'll be happy because I love watching him play. I mean, his skating is out of this world good, and his IQ is already NHL, I think. But, his offensive game could get better, and would it get better with a year in junior or staying here? I think ultimately where the rebuild is and what they've always told us, Jordan, is we want to be competitive now, but we want that greatness later. Well, if you're shooting for the greatness later in terms of Jett Luchanko, I think it might be better for him to go back. Yeah. But, I mean, it could happen if he stays. I'm not saying it can happen if he stays. I just think maybe the chances are a little bit better if he gets all those reps down in junior. But, hey, I'm not paid to make those decisions. And I think that either way, you're in pretty good shape. He's not going to hurt the team. I don't think you're going to destroy the kid if you keep him up here. I don't think he's going to be overwhelmed. He's just too good already, I think, to be overwhelmed. But, if you sit there a month in and you've got no goals, 2 assists, even though you're playing well and you're doing some things defensively well and you're getting some chances, and you still see that goose egg there, and that can wear on you a little bit. I worry about that too. Whereas he's not going to have a goose egg down in junior very long. So there's a lot to consider here, Jordan. I don't have any clue as to what direction they're going. I think the fact that he was the extra skater in practice on Monday would lead you to believe he might not play Tuesday, which leads you to believe maybe he's a little bit closer to going back to junior, but it might just be that they're going to not play him in both of the back-to-backs, and they decided to play him in the road game on Wednesday. So we might be reading too much into that. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong here. I do think that either way they go, it can work. It'll be very interesting to see which direction they go. But I mean, if you think about what Danny and Jonesy have been saying about we're concerned about now, for sure, we want to be competitive, and they certainly were competitive last year. They're hoping to be competitive this year. But the main goal is also still to be competitively great. I mean, every year be considered a Stanley Cup contender every season. The way it used to be. Yeah. And to get to that, you've got to make sure that these draft picks aren't just good, but some of them become great. Yeah. So they have to consider what is better for Jett Luchanko to become great a year or two down the road.
Yeah, I think that's what made him give the Flyers reason to keep him, were the two things you mentioned. He wasn't going to hurt them, and he wouldn't be overwhelmed. Now, would he be scoring every night? Probably not. But he wasn't going to hurt them, and I don't think he has hurt them. But I'm with you, Jim. I think it's a really tough call, and eventually I think they'll put Jett Luchanko first and maybe think, man, what could scoring do for his confidence down at the junior level? What could be playing at the World Championship do for his confidence?
And he could also, Jordan, stay here and still play in the World Junior too. You can pass the 9-game mark, and of course then you have the year burned on his entry-level contract, but you can still let him go play World Juniors. So they can do both that way. The decision is more Guelph versus here, I guess, and what they think is better for him. I think ultimately that's the most important thing, as opposed to maybe he's a little bit better than one of their other options at center right now on the team. I think the way they've talked about this whole rebuild, I think more important is what's best for Jett Luchanko. So they have to determine what that is. Exactly.
And Jim, my last question for you, Nick Seeler. I think it's a guy that is really important to this team. We saw in March when he was out for 11 games. Last season, they struggled. And it wasn't the only reason for why they struggled. But here they are early in the season. They haven't had him for 5 games. It's appearing that he will make his return, his season debut on Tuesday. But just how important is this guy, do you think, to their goal prevention, their penalty killing, and just their overall energy, I think, and how they play?
He is important. There's no doubt. In fact, I now know what my next mission is. I've got to get that record with and without Nick Seeler over the last 2 years. It's, maybe Nick should have waited to sign the contract after we get that number out there. But he's, I mean, what a great story Nick Seeler is. I mean, he's a guy who, was out of the hockey. He was his father's painting business and, not that long ago. And now he's considered a top 4 vital part of this team, and deservedly so. I mean, he does so many things well. Blocking shots, of course, is the one thing, the hallmark that everybody knows about. But it's more than that. He moves the puck quickly. He's a great player to have as a protective player, always willing to defend his teammates. I think importantly for Jamie Drysdale, it gives him a left-handed shot partner. Eric Johnson did the best he could, but to have 2 righties on a pair is really difficult. Doesn't give the guy who's playing on the right side an option all the time with his partner on the other side. So that will help Jamie Drysdale. They did look like they were starting to develop some things late last year, so we hope that happens too. But he's also just, everybody loves him. Everybody in the room loves him. He just loves to play hockey, goes from the nicest guy in the world to a warrior out on that ice. And when Angry Nick shows up and he gets all red-faced, it's kind of contagious with the team. So he is obviously has been missed and will, I think, help that second pair, just because as much as anything, he's a left-handed shot that's going to help, and also the other things I talked about. So he'll be a welcome addition to get him back. And the defense, we talked a lot about the offense and the lack of chances there, but much of the Flyers game last year in terms of being so good in transition, that starts with your defenseman many times. I mean, Sean Walker was so good at that first pass, getting it up. Nick Seeler can do that as well. We know York and Sanheim can do it. Hoping that Risto and Zamula can also be part of that. Got to get that puck moving to get that transition game going. Nick will help with that too.
Yeah, it can absolutely help Jamie Drysdale and really help them play with pace. I think they want to play with more pace. That's been a big, initiative for John Tortorella, is playing with pace. And Seeler certainly is a guy that I think will help them do that. Well, Jim, real treat as always. Thank you so much for joining us. A couple national broadcasts coming up Tuesday, Wednesday, but I know we're looking forward to hearing your call over the weekend for this home back-to-back. A big thank you, and hope you're doing well.
I'm doing fine. Calm down, everybody. It's early. I feel the angst in Flyers Nation, but and we wish it would have gone better, but still very early. They do need, though, after a 1-3-1 start, they need a really good second segment of 5 games here, and most of them are at home. So we'll see if they can, get back on track and get settled now in the same time zone for a little while, and hopefully that will lead to this thing getting turned around in a hurry.
Yeah, last thing you want to do as a team is probably create a hole for yourself. And I think the Flyers aren't quite there yet, but as you mentioned, the next 5 games, even more important now. And we'll see how it goes. Jim, a big thank you. As always a treat to get your insight here on the Flyers Talk podcast. A big thank you to Ben Berry, our podcast producer and guru, and also Tom Feiner for helping us out here. And Flyers fans, as always, thank you so much for listening to the latest Flyers Talk podcast. Wherever you get your podcasts, please rate and listen, and we cannot wait to talk to you next time.